quiet my soul, 'cause you're teaching me how to slow down.
Good morning, River House. Pastor Jordan here today, and I am super excited to have my beautiful bride-to-be, Jackie, joining me as well.
Good morning, River House. Happy to be here.
We want to talk today about our next daily practice that is going towards constructing our rhythm of life. And again, just a reminder, this rhythm of life consists of a tempo and then 6 daily practices that we're calling you to abide in throughout this quarantine season to build a foundation that will then continue beyond. And I want to remind you that the tempo is slow down. Think slower, speak slower, drive slower, be slower, slow down so that you can catch up with God. With God, slow is fast and fast is slow. So I want to encourage you today, slow down. And the daily practice we want to talk about is Thanksgiving. This is something that we have been really intentionally engaging within together in this season in particular, and feel like God's inviting us to an even greater expression of this and tapping into a greater power of what Thanksgiving is. And so I'm going to read a scripture verse, and then we'll just talk about what this has looked like in this season and what we are calling you to. So this is the story in Luke 9 where Jesus is multiplying the bread and the fish to feed the 5,000. And it says, that the 12 disciples came to him and said, we got to send the crowd away because, we can't feed them. They need to go home and eat. And Jesus replies in verse 13 and says, you give them something to eat. And the disciples reply and say, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless perhaps we go and buy food for all of these people. And the connotation is they're like, this is impossible. Look at the lack and the need, Jesus, right? And it reveals a difference of perspective where the disciples weren't looking at the provision. They were looking at what was lacking. Jesus said, well, what do we have? And they brought the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. He looked at the provision and he blessed it and gave thanks, and then God multiplied, right? God can only bless what we are able to give thanks for, right? And Jesus saw what God had given. He was aware of what God was doing. He was not focused on what wasn't happening. God is consumed with life. Everything he has is abundant life. And so Thanksgiving is a tool that trains us to look and see what God has given and keeps us from focusing and dwelling on what we don't have. And you had a story that kind of earlier this year.
Yeah, so if you're like me, that's not like an automatic thing to do. Just looking at the need is more automatic, I think, by human nature. So for me, personally, this summer I was raising money for a mission trip. So you might be able to relate with this exact thing. And I told Jordan, I was like, I'm really believing and praying God for the full amount. It was a big amount too. And I actually had just quit my job, so I really needed the full amount. And I was like, praying, believing. Money was coming in really slowly, would get a little bit more. And it was about like a week before the full amount was due. And I just was like, I'm kind of bummed. Like, I didn't raise the full amount. Was it bad that I was believing for it? And so I asked him that. And I was so thankful that he encouraged me, like, but look what you did get. Like, look how God did provide. And so I just shifted my focus and I was like, you're right. That's like thousands of dollars I did not have. And I began to just turn my heart towards gratitude and be so thankful for what God was doing. And in his goodness, literally 48 and 24 hours right before this was due, he just lavished blessings and I was able to receive the rest. But that didn't even matter at that point because I was so content and so at peace once I found thanksgiving for what God was doing and how he was lavishing blessings. So it wasn't automatic, but once it was an intentional act that I had to choose, it began to bring freedom.
And so really, Thanksgiving is a discipline. It's not a feeling. It's a powerful choice, right? And Jackie and I we've been in this season, having to postpone our wedding, all these plans, dreams kind of, imploded overnight, it seems like. And we've had a couple times, really just in the last week, where we were, if we're being real, in a lot of anxiety, pain, kind of in our own feelings, like, how could this happen? All these frustrations. And there was one day in particular, we just decided to like, okay, let's go on a walk and let's just be thankful and give thanks to God together on this walk. And we just went back and forth and back and forth. Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving. I mean, and what would you say that experience was like?
Yeah, it brought the most peace in this season of a lot of sadness, grief, and just unfamiliar, like loss of expectation, disappointment. And so it's been a real battle to find peace. And as soon as we turned our hearts to gratitude and intentionally even thanked one another, like it's been hard on our relationship and the dynamic, because when one's anxious, one's angry, it just causes a rub, which you guys might be experiencing in your own homes and lives right now. So it's like, I have to look at Jordan and be like, I am so thankful for your humility. And then like, it's like, the weight was lifted as I began to list things that I was thankful for about him and in him. And it shifted where my eyes were focused. And so, yeah, it brought a lot of peace.
So the daily practice we want to call you to, and us as a church in this season, is to give thanks often and actually to do it with someone in community. Mm-hmm. Like I would encourage you, in your times with the Lord, be thankful and give thanks to God. But I've actually found that, and we've been experiencing, there's an even greater power you can tap into when you do it with someone and you're like, hey, I'm thankful. Like, I've been telling God, I'm so thankful for the opportunity and how you're growing us in this season through walking through the loss of huge expectations and seeing like the provision of God in the midst of it. So I want to encourage you, do this on your own, but the daily practice is to be thankful in community with, a friend, a spouse, a child, whatever it is to actually practice Thanksgiving with one another and give thanks in corporately. And I believe that God is actually working to fix our eyes, and he's going to train us through this practice to be aware of what he's doing on any given day, right? Even when it seemed like there were 5,000 people that were going to starve, God had an answer. It was different than what we would think, but he had an answer. And right now, in the midst of quarantine and an economic instability and everything else going on in the world, the health concerns, there is so much lack, negativity, frustration, thwarted plans, lack of, things that just are stirring up all kinds of stuff, that it's really easy to focus on that. But Thanksgiving will fix our eyes on what God is doing in these days. So I want to call you to discipline yourself to be thankful in every single day. Set apart a time and do it with a spouse, with a friend, with a roommate, with a child, with somebody. Be grateful.